Good afternoon. My name is Kara Cleveland, and I'm the supervisor of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, Indiana Libraries and the 2020 Census, presented by Katie Springer, coordinator and librarian for the State Data Center at the Indiana State Library. A few housekeeping items before we start. If you are having sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. If there's a global sound issue, we will announce it in that chat box. If you're unable to resolve the sound issue you're experiencing, we are recording the webinar and you can watch it offline after it has ended. Again, if there's a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in that chat box. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and we'll get your question to Katie as soon as there's a good opportunity. And there should also be time at the end for questions. The session today is worth 1 LEU, and your certificate will be available for download at the end of the webinar. Also, today's webinar will be recorded and archived. After the webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's archived webinars page. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. Okay, let's get started. I am now happy to turn the presentation over to Katie.
Thank you very much. Christine, if you're still getting an echo, we're waiting for Lisa to check that out. Okay, Lisa's going to help you, Christine. Welcome to Indiana Libraries and the 2020 Census. My name is Katie Springer. I'm with the Indiana State Data Center at the State Library. It's fun to see some of the people that are logging in. A lot of the names I recognize from working at the library for the last 10 years. Some of you already know me. I am a government information and a data librarian, and I spend most of my days at the library assisting patrons with statistics research. I also act as the program coordinator for the State Data Center Network. We're a federal state partner with the Census Bureau, a network of libraries and other organizations that agree to make sure Hoosiers have access to accurate, relevant, and timely public data. This webinar is to help librarians prepare for the upcoming 2020 census. Before we peer into the future, what I had in mind was that we would watch this really great short film about the census, but I was just told that we can't watch this live during the webinar. So I'm going to give you the web link right now so that you can watch it at some point. And what it is, it's an informative and entertaining 1960 census film where they're quite serious about the census, but it's actually pretty funny to watch. There are different things that are mentioned in the film, like the fact that going back to the 1790 census, the purpose of us counting people is still the same. The goal of the census is to count everyone in the United States in one place at one time. So if you have a chance to watch the film, you don't have to watch it now. It's just a fun thing to watch after our presentation is finished. Census Day is April 1, 2020. Starting in March of next year, the Census Bureau sends out the first mailing of the census, inviting Hoosiers to answer it online for the first time in history. Everyone will have the option of completing the census how they would like to complete it, online through computer or smartphone, through the usual mailback process on paper form, or over the phone with a Census Bureau representative. The census will be online and in print in 13 languages and in Braille. The Census Bureau will provide guides for completing the census in 59 non-English languages, including American Sign Language in video and in print. State and local organizations will share the responsibilities for working with the Census Bureau to provide additional translation assistance to their own communities as needed. New for the 2020 census, the planned question that asks about race will allow a write-in self-response box with enough characters for multiple races and ethnicities to be listed by hand. To begin preparing ourselves, let's look at the Census Bureau's operational timeline so far. The more we know about the census process, the better prepared we'll be. In March of 2018, the Census Bureau delivered the list of questions to be included in the census to Congress. It's important that we're familiar with these questions as they will appear online and as they will appear on the paper mailback forms. You can find the list of planned census questions that were submitted to Congress in PDF on the Census Bureau's 2020 census website. On Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court decision was against adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census. As there are updates to this, we will issue them via the State Data Center listserv and the 2020 Census in Indiana website. You may have been wondering what exactly is expected of librarians and library staff, besides answering our own actual censuses for our households when the time comes. Well, the good people at the American Library Association have anticipated our needs. In May, they issued a library's guide to the 2020 census. Please take a look at this guide and share it with fellow library workers. You don't have to be an ALA member to access it. It's a 25-page PDF available for free on the ALA website. You can also find links to it via the State Data Center's Facebook and Twitter pages. This guide explains basic census operations that Census Bureau employees are responsible for. It details how more than 320 million people will receive census materials and gives this basic timeline starting in January 2020. I don't have the timeline up on the slide, but it is included in the guide to the 2020 census. The ALA mentions many people who are at risk of being undercounted in the census, and it outlines Census Bureau efforts in traditionally hard-to-count communities. The hard-to-count population is where we come in as librarians. As libraries, we are trusted voices in our communities and can help people understand the value of filling out the census, even when it may take some extra effort. Here are several reminders of why we fill out the census. Census data is used to apportion the seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Federal, state, and local governments and the public depend on these numbers for fair representation. Hundreds of billions of dollars in federal and state funding are allotted to our communities for neighborhood improvements, public health, education, transportation, and more. Census data affects decisions about where libraries are built, where services for the elderly are provided, and what job training centers can offer us. The more we're able to help patrons with this process, the greater impact we have on our community's well-being and our own quality of life. So how can libraries help? The ALA guide advises that we prepare our libraries for an increased need for computer usage. This will ensure that patrons can apply for census jobs, complete online training for these jobs, and most importantly, to complete the census forms online starting in March 2020. The guide suggests we consider designating one or more computers or mobile devices for express use or temporarily dedicated device specifically for census response. One of the things we were talking about is that this timeline of March 2020, it's not been announced yet exactly in March when that first mailing is going to be. And also we're waiting for the kind of the verification that once you receive the mailing, whether you have to wait until April 1 to actually go to a website to fill out the census. So we'll keep you updated on that information. Libraries can do several things at no cost to help get the word out about the census. We can promote reliable information by handing out flyers from the Census Bureau and other trusted sources. The guide talks about the fact that we need to fight misinformation and disinformation. We can share information about census employment and census events on our social media pages. Earlier this year, the Census Bureau released its 2020 Census promotional guidelines with instructions on using the 2020 Census logo and guidelines for promotion. We can also help increase awareness by doing displays and creating our own materials using the Census logo in the library and online. The Census Bureau provides guides and toolkits for reaching out to specific groups on the 2020census.gov website. On the right-hand side of the slide, you see the 50 years of advances in the U.S. Census on the second floor of the library. We just put that up in May, on May 21st. So come by and see it. We have plenty of sources for outreach materials to use either as handouts or on your social media pages. You can use these as templates to create your own for your library. The Census Bureau's resources include one-page sheets on the 2020 census and confidentiality, which is a big issue this year, with information about how Title 13 protects our personal information, and also handouts on Census 101, what you need to know. We've created a one-page 2020 census fact sheet on why it's important for Hoosiers to fill out the census in 2020. And we also have a collection of talking points for different audiences, such as schools, cultural institutions, and businesses. Another way to participate is to hold special programs and events at the library. In December of last year, we brought a homegrown program called Get on the Map to Vigo County Public Library, where there were low response rates to the census for Indiana during the 2010 census. We partnered with the Geography Educators Network of Indiana to make this happen. We provided 2 sessions, one for homeschool families at the main library and one for after-school drop-in students at the West Terre Haute branch. Our 45-minute program used geography, math, and storytelling to explain why it's so important that we get an accurate count of people in our communities. The response was very positive. We had several parents thank us for it, and library staff were equally enthused. We also plan on doing a Census Day program at the State Library with free coffee and donuts for people who fill out the census in real time on our computers or on their smartphones on April 1st. In addition to outreach materials and events, libraries can generate awareness by starting or joining complete count committees or CCCs in your areas. Local governments and other organizations have begun to form CCCs across the nation to help get an accurate count in the 2020 census. These groups are filled with members from all levels of community leadership and involvement. Multiple stakeholders can collaborate in determining the best local strategy to increase awareness and motivate the public to answer the census, with a special focus on hard-to-count populations. Zoom into Indiana on the map to determine if there is currently a CCC in your area. This map also gives you contact information for the local CCCs. They tried to update this map. It was just released 2 weeks ago. And if you think that you do know of a CCC in your area that's not on the map, you can contact me, and I have the contact information for the people that create this map, so I'll pass on the word to them. While we're performing outreach, who do we turn to for support in our efforts? Earlier this year, the Census Bureau opened 40 local area census offices in cities across the nation, including Indianapolis. By September of this year, the remaining offices will open. Indiana plans to have 4 in total, with offices in Fort Wayne, Evansville, and Lake County. The Census Bureau itself is organized nationwide into 6 regional offices. Our regional office is the Chicago Regional Office, which serves 8 states, including Indiana. We can call or email the regional office directly with questions, but during the 2020 census, our local area census offices are the best source for 2020 census questions. The Indiana State Data Center here at the State Library is, as always, available to help answer questions as well, via walk-in, phone, live chat, or 24/7 Ask a Librarian research service. Our library is here to help your library with any especially challenging questions or information requests. And I put my personal email on the slide because if you need to email me directly, please do. You can stay updated about the 2020 census in several ways. Sign up for email updates at the bottom of the 2020 Census Partnership website. You'll just follow this link and scroll all the way to the bottom of the site. There's a sign up field, and what it will do, it'll take you into an interface that lets you check off different census notifications you'd like to get, and you just check off the 2020 census notifications that you'd like to see. You can join the State Data Center listserv. This is a listserv that I maintain. I try to push out information directly from the Census Bureau and other statistical agencies. I also share anything that's going on with our State Data Center network with this listserv. So if anybody else has any news that they'd like to share or tips that they have, I can spread the word that way too. Of course, social media is huge this census. It's one of the biggest censuses for social media. So you can join the SDC Facebook and Twitter pages. I encourage you to also join the Census Bureau's Facebook and Twitter pages and anything else to do with the census so that you can stay up to date with your local area about census activities. The 2020 Census in Indiana page is a page that the State Data Center Network shares with the Indiana Business Research Center. We have tried to focus any of the national information from the Census Bureau plus any recent news stories on this website. We push out any of the really timely, important information about the 2020 census there. So you can always visit that website as well. So if you have questions about the census, you know where to reach us via email or phone. We've allowed a lot of time for Q&A today, so please type up your questions in chat and we'll try to get them answered now. If we're not able to answer them live, then email me after we finish up and I will answer you. Thanks for listening, and we're going to try to answer some of your questions. Okay, the first question is there any chance at all that the census will be delayed? That's a good question because that's on everybody's minds right now because of the recent news in the last 3 days or so. We don't know the answer to that yet. I think the Supreme Court decision on Friday told us the answer to the biggest question that was on everybody's mind about the citizenship question. And so you're going to be doing the same thing as me. You're going to be watching the news and seeing if we can answer that question for us. But as soon as I know the answer to that, I will push that out via the SDC listserv and social media. Okay, how many people will be hired in any given area? There are a few different recordings that have been done of the 2020 census press release and different speeches that have been made. There's a really good one that occurred on April 1 that talks about the hiring process, and Tim, and I don't remember his last name, but he's the one that heads all of that hiring across the nation and any of the field ops. So I can send you a link to that recording so that you can hear what he has to do, what he has to say about the hiring that has been taking place and how much hiring will take place in the future. Our next question is the census available in Spanish? Yes, the census itself will be available in Spanish. The online form will be available in Spanish, and so will the paper form. And if you have a follow-up question to that, go ahead and type that in. The next question is, can you talk more about the Get on the Map program and the map on the floor? Sure, I'm happy to do that. We have a giant floor map of Indiana. We have a copy of one here at the State Library that you can come and see, but there's also one that circulates through the Geography Educators Network of Indiana. So a library or a school can check out the floor map, and then there's this huge trunk of materials that comes with it. So the materials that are in there are curriculum guides, books, different things that you can use on the map when you're doing your program. And one of the things that we did is we had another program a couple of years ago, right when a tornado had touched down in an area of Indiana. And Kathy, the director of Genie, had these little wooden tornadoes made. So we were able to put those on the map where the tornado had touched down, and then trace the path of the destruction with a little plastic chain. So it's that kind of stuff that's in that trunk, and it helps to kind of frame your program. And the sky's the limit on what you would want to do with the map. For 2020 outreach, we tried to relate it to why are we counting the number of people that are in these communities? Why is it important to have an accurate number? And we related it basically to resources. How are we using resources, and how does the number of people affect how natural resources are used? So let's see. So Julie Bradford, are illegal immigrants allowed to fill out the census? I'm going to repeat off of that first slide. The purpose of the census is to count everyone that is residing in the United States at one place at one time. So that includes illegal immigrants. There are special situations, especially for mobile populations, that it's going to be hard to count them because they may not be in one place at one time. But really, filling out the census is for anyone that is residing in the United States at the time of the census. So the next question is, what is the Facebook page to follow? There is a state data center, so it's Indiana State Data Center Facebook page that you'll want to follow, but the Census Bureau itself also has a Facebook page to follow. If you want an additional page to follow that has even more ideas, that includes people across the nation, there's also a Facebook page for the Census State Data Centers. So that's our entire state data center network, and people will be generating different ideas on that site as well. Our next question is, how can a CCC be created in my county? The Census Bureau sent out word, I think in the beginning of this year, to state and local government entities, so state, county, and local officials. That was one of the modes of outreach that they used. So that's where you'll check first to see if a CCC has been created. So check with your county officials or your city or town officials. And if it hasn't been created, you can create your own. These CCCs at a local level can really be as small as you want them to be, as long as their group is composed of a group of people that cares about getting an accurate count of the people in your community. You can create your own. There are several guides to creating your CCC. They're available on the 2020 census website, the Census Bureau's website, and they're also available on the 2020 Census in Indiana website. Another site that I'll recommend to you is the Indiana Philanthropy Alliance. They have been traveling through the state for the last 2 years talking about how important the census is, and they have amassed a huge list of resources on their website. So that's also a great place to go for CCC ideas. Okay. And I think we're still getting a few questions in, so I'm going to wait for that to be populated in the chat box. Oh, complete, yeah, CCC, as a reminder, that is a complete count committee. And it's basically a community-based committee that has committed to getting the word out about the census and establishing a group whose purpose it is to get an accurate count of the people in that community. Oh, I guess. Okay, so our next question is, can citizens mail in their information, or is it by computer only? Yes, citizens can mail in their information. There are 3 main modes that the census can be done, either by internet, which is new this year, by the traditional mail back of the paper form, and by phone with a Census Bureau representative. And somebody was able to type in the Facebook page. Thank you very much. Stephanie Rollins, she is the chair of the CCC in her county. So I'm sorry, I'm reading some of the other comments on the CCCs. Dennis Everett is in a group in Delaware County that is doing the work of a CCC. Okay. And again, a CCC does not have to be formalized. It can just be a group of concerned people that really want to make sure that the federal and state dollars that are supposed to be allotted to your community do come in by making sure that there's an accurate count. Okay, the next question is, if we're encouraging patrons to fill out census information online in the library, how do we try to mitigate double counting? That's a great question. I'm going to assume that the form that the Census Bureau, the online form the Census Bureau has, is going to be programmed, coded somehow to not allow a double count of a certain address. Now, I am not sure what these online forms are going to look like yet. I do a training with the Census Bureau. I attend training every year, and they did not show us the actual online form with all of the questions and how it would work. Not like a live demo, so I'm not sure yet how that's going to look. But let me take your question and ask a couple of people that are in the State Data Center Network to see if anybody has any idea of how they're going to make sure that there's no repeat of an address. Knowing that how Census Bureau has done things in the past, they have several tests that they do, and cybersecurity is a huge issue with them. So they probably have tackled that question already. So yes, how do we try to mitigate the double counting, like if the census worker visits the house after the census has already been filled out for that address? And that's an excellent question. I will get back to you on that. And after I talk to somebody at the Census Bureau. Okay, do we have any other further questions? Okay, this is a question about the method by which census workers collect data. Will the census worker call to collect census data, or will individuals call themselves? If census workers make the call, is there a code or something individuals should know to prevent scam issues? I do know that scam issues are a huge deal, that the Census Bureau wants to let everybody know that they're going to be very clear about who it is that either visits or calls a home. As far as whether the census worker is going to call or individuals call themselves, I know enough to know that there will be Census Bureau workers available via phone, but I'm not sure if it's only one way or the other. I don't know if there is a step in the process that the census workers will call before they come to the door, or whether individuals can call immediately on April 1st. So let's look into that. The time frame may not even be set for that yet, but let me keep that in mind and we'll get back with you on that. Okay, I'm curious why the Indiana State Census site is through the university. Well, that's a great question. The Indiana Business Research Center, the deputy director there is Carol Rogers, and she has actually been with the State Data Center program from its very inception in the 1970s. I don't know how much you want to know about the State Data Center network history, but Indianapolis was one of the pilot programs for this nationwide program. The State Data Center program was started in '76 with some employees from the Census Bureau who worked in Indianapolis who wanted a more local center that people could go to get national level data. So the Census Bureau started it was a study that they did of several organizations in Indiana that kind of surveyed and visited libraries, economic development centers, universities. It was many different kinds of organizations to determine what kind of data was needed in those local areas. So after that pilot program, it was determined that there was going to be a state data center in every single state. So at least one office where you could go in and actually get the tape files run for your local area, so that it was more of a state and local level distribution process instead of just coming out of DC. There's now an affiliate network, so we have STC affiliates across the state, and it's the same in other states. There's one lead center, and then there are affiliates located throughout the state. So the Indiana Business Research Center is one of our coordinating affiliates, along with the Department of Workforce Development and the Indiana Geographic Information Center. So we have quite a huge network of people in Indiana because we've been around since the 70s. It looks like we are finishing up the questions. If anybody else has any lingering questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. I'm happy to answer anything now. And if you do think of something after the program, please feel free to email me or call me, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. So this is another question. April 1 is the kickoff date, but how long can we keep the online census computer station open? That's a great question, and we probably need to wait until there's more of an exact timeline on how long that initial period is going to be. From April 1, I think there is an existing timeline that'll tell us when the mailings are coming out, because there's a series of 4 mailings. That initial mailing will be an invitation for most of the country receiving it to fill out the census online, and then the next mailing will be anybody that has not answered that first mailing will receive a census form. And I may not be exactly right. It might be that second or third mailing where the form is actually sent out. But there is a description of that on the Census Bureau's website, and I can get that answer for you. And then you'll have more of an idea of how long to keep that station open. Oh, I don't know if you, Dennis, you wanted me to repeat this, but there is trying to de-emphasize that April 1 date is sometimes a good idea. Yeah, if there's some concern about April 1 being April Fool's Day. And of course, at your library, it is at your discretion when you promote the census. If you have an event, and I encourage people to have some kind of event, because sometimes it's the way to really get that outreach started. It's completely up to you how you frame it and what you want to do with your community and how you think they would receive it. Oh, great. Somebody posted the timeline of the mailings. That's excellent. So you can tell when everybody's invited, and then you'll see how many mailings will go out. And of course, the opportunity to answer it online will be throughout, more than a month or so after April. So take a look at that timeline of the mailings. Do we have any other questions?
While we're waiting to see if there are any more questions, I just want to remind you that the link for the LEU certificate is on the screen right now, so you can go ahead and download that. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is, do people need to have a physical address to fill out census info? There's a two-part answer to that question. There are physical address lists that will be matched up, and you're actually going to be able to just fill out your census online by typing in your physical address. But that's not to say that we, the people with physical addresses, are the only people that will be filling out the census. In group quarters, such as hospitals and prisons and other institutions, those will be collected slightly differently. And there are details on how those are collected on the Census Bureau's website. There are also mobile populations that the Census Bureau is still trying to capture, and they still do use different methods to try to capture those people and get accurate numbers. The physical address, though, is the most reliable way to determine who is in one place at one time. So ideally, you need a physical address to have that census filled out. So yes, it says like people without homes. There is a special effort to count the homeless, and there are details on the Census Bureau website, on the 2020 Census website about that. And if you want, I've actually just answered this question recently for somebody in our government documents working group, our networking group, so I can also email you that answer if you'd like. Okay, any more questions? Looks like we may have finished our question and answer period. Thank you very much for attending our 2020 Census and Libraries program. Again, if you have any further questions about the 2020 Census, please don't hesitate to ask me directly. We will be updating people on all of the new news that is coming out about the census. So check that Indiana 2020 Census site. And if you have any other concerns, please contact us directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this for us, Katie. All right, I hope you all have a very